The night hums low and quiet outside your window, a hush settling like dew across rooftops and leaves. The air holds its breath. You're tucked into a soft stillness, heart slowly sinking with the rhythm of the dark. The world asks nothing more of you. Your eyelids grow heavy, the weight of a long day dissolving into a gentler gravity. As the last conscious thoughts begin to dim, you feel yourself floating toward a quieter space, one where time doesn't tick, but drifts. You are invited now not just to sleep, but to drift across eons. You're not merely falling into slumber, you're stepping backward, farther back than memory, farther than myth, and past the veil of history itself. Tonight, the earth wants to tell you a story. Not the story of cities or empires, not even the story of trees or dinosaurs or ancient oceans filled with fish. No, this story is older, so much older that even the rocks had just begun to speak. It is a tale whispered by wind that touched no leaves, by water that knew no fish, by sky that held no blue. This is the story of the Proterozoic Eon, an age too old for memory, yet written in every cell of your being. Before we step through the threshold of time, feel how vast the silence becomes. Let yourself be held by it. As you listen, I invite you to become part of something enormous and still, something ancient and wide as sleep. In the quiet comment box below, you might whisper your location and the hour you're listening. Let it be a gentle act, like lighting a candle in the dark. Someone else, across oceans or valleys, is listening too. Your words join theirs in a constellation of dreamers, scattered across the globe, carried by this shared night. Close your eyes and follow my voice, not forward, but back. Imagine the years peeling away, one by one, like autumn leaves caught in a breeze. The stars above you don't yet know the names we'll give them. The moon is closer to the earth, tugging tides more fiercely. The continents are not where you remember them. They drift like sleepwalkers, colliding and breaking apart in slow, grinding dreams. You've arrived at a time long before dinosaurs or mammals, before forests or flowers, before insects buzzed or birds ever flew. This is a quieter Earth, a young Earth, a world just learning how to breathe. It is the Proterozoic Eon, stretching from 2.5 billion to 541 million years ago, an unimaginably long chapter of Earth's life, nearly 2 billion years in which the planet transformed itself in ways invisible to eyes, but undeniable in consequence. In this stretch of deep time, life began to change from simple to complex, from lone whispers to collaborative songs. Cells developed nuclei. Oxygen, once poison, became promise. The atmosphere, the crust, the oceans, they all changed their chemistry, and in doing so, changed the possibilities for everything that would follow. But none of this happened quickly. The Proterozoic does not shout. It does not erupt in drama. It does not explode with action or chase spectacle. It is instead a slow exhale, a long lullaby hummed by stone and water. That's why we begin our journey here, because it's the perfect place to fall asleep and dream. Imagine now an earth without color as you know it. The sky above you isn't blue. It's pale and cloudy, veiled in haze. The air is dense with carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and methane. There's no smell of flowers, no chirping of crickets. There's no grass beneath your feet, no rustle of trees. Instead, you stand on bare rock, newly cooled and weathered, its surface scattered with volcanic glass, dark minerals, and minerals you've never seen before. The only green you'll find is in the ocean, and even that green is not comforting. It's iron rich and thick, like a soup where sunlight barely dares to dive. The continents are small and scattered. Some haven't even formed yet. The land masses that do exist are harsh, flat, rocky, wind blasted. Mountains rise slowly, erode slowly, like old thoughts trying to take shape. There is no soil because there are no roots. Rain falls without purpose, carving young valleys into bare terrain, flowing into silent seas where only microbes drift. Beneath the surface of those ancient oceans, life carries on, almost unnoticed. You wouldn't see it if you stood there. No fish swim, no shells scatter the seafloor. But if you had a microscope, one not yet invented, you'd discover life in its smallest, most tenacious form. Bacteria, archaea, tiny, determined architects of transformation. These single-celled beings are the unsung heroes of the Proterozoic, sculpting the atmosphere with every breath, even though they have no lungs. Cyanobacteria, in particular, perform a quiet miracle, photosynthesis. They draw energy from light and release oxygen as waste. But at this stage, oxygen is not a gift. To the other microbes, it's a threat. Oxygen begins to accumulate, first in the oceans, where it binds with iron, staining the seafloor red with rust. Then slowly, over millions of years, it escapes into the air, changing the very skin of the planet. The great oxygenation event is not an explosion, not a sudden change. It's a long sigh that takes place over hundreds of millions of years, a transformation as gentle as the one lulling you now. You might ask, why tell this story at bedtime? Why speak of ancient oceans and toxic air when sleep calls? Because there is something in this deep time that mirrors your own surrender to rest. Like the earth in the Proterozoic, you are quieting now, slowing, transforming silently. Your thoughts begin to float like microbial drifters. You are becoming still, but not lifeless. You are preparing for something. Renewal, dream, awakening. And just like the Proterozoic, your stillness is not empty. Inside this quiet, slow things are happening. Growths you cannot see. Shifts you cannot name. Your body breathes without your help. Your mind wanders without direction. You're drifting into a world where time stretches, where light bends, where the world is not yet fully formed, and neither are you. That's okay. Let it happen. Let yourself dissolve gently into the past. Tonight, as you fall asleep, you're not alone. The earth is here, humming softly under your pillow, whispering the oldest lullaby it knows. You are floating in time, like stardust suspended in a dark sea, and ahead of you, a billion years of gentle transformation awaits. There's no need to hurry. We will walk through each age slowly, hand in hand with stone and sky and cell. The Proterozoic is patient, and so are we. Let yourself sink deeper now as we begin. It's quiet now, and the world you rest in is beginning to take on a different shape, not through sudden noise or blinding light, but through the slow stretch of time itself. You're drifting further backward, deeper into the folds of Earth's memory. The air grows thicker, not just with age, but with the breath of a world not yet tamed. If you could stand beneath the sky of the early Proterozoic, you might tilt your head upward and find no familiar hue. The blue we associate with daylight would be missing, replaced by a hazy dome, the color of ash and amber, touched with streaks of orange from the scattering of sunlight through a dense, foggy atmosphere. There were no birds to cut through it, no clouds shaped like anything you know, only a stillness above that felt both heavy and hollow. This sky was not lifeless, but it offered little comfort. It wrapped the Earth in a warm, choking blanket made mostly of carbon dioxide and methane. Oxygen was still a newcomer, rare and unwelcome to many of the microscopic beings that populated the ancient oceans. Without abundant oxygen, there was no ozone layer, and without ozone, ultraviolet light from the sun reached the surface with intense and unforgiving sharpness. Life, if it wished to thrive, had to remain sheltered, underwater, under rock, or deep within mats of other organisms. The surface world, dry and empty, waited. Beneath that unrecognizable sky, the continents were not what you would recognize. They were small and scattered, like floating rafts of stone across a planet still cooling from its primordial heat. These ancient land masses had names like Kennerland and Nuna, forgotten syllables worn away by time. They bore little resemblance to modern landscapes. The surfaces were harsh, scorched by solar radiation, and devoid of vegetation. There was no green, no brown, no scent of loam or pine. The only sound was the wind howling across barren rock, and perhaps the hiss of steam where hot springs leaked through fractures in the crust. Yet even in this desolate picture, Earth was alive. Not loudly, not in bursts of color or motion, but quietly, insistently. It breathed through its geology, through the gentle pull of tectonic plates, the rumble of distant volcanoes, and the slow accumulation of minerals along the ocean floor. It lived through the quiet persistence of microscopic life, drifting in waters tinged green and brown with dissolved iron and sulfur. These waters were dense and alien to modern swimmers, filled not with fish or coral, but with ancient chemistries, some toxic, some transformative. And in these murky oceans, something remarkable was unfolding. Cyanobacteria, tiny photosynthetic bacteria, floated near the surface, absorbing sunlight and producing oxygen as a byproduct. These unassuming organisms were changing everything, although nothing around them seemed to notice at the time. With each cycle of light and dark, they added infinitesimal puffs of oxygen to the water and eventually to the air. The world above remained opaque and harsh, but the world below was quietly shifting. As oxygen accumulated, the seas began to rust. Iron dissolved in seawater met this new reactive gas and formed insoluble oxides, rust essentially, that sank to the seafloor. Layer upon layer, these rust-colored deposits formed what we now call banded iron formations, striped geological tapestries that still decorate ancient rocks around the world. If you could walk along one of those seafloors, you'd see these patterns accumulating over time, a rhythm of red and gray, iron and silica, a quiet song of chemical transformation. But this oxygenation came at a cost. For countless other microbes that had thrived in the oxygen-free environment, this new gas was toxic. The air they once breathed was changing into something deadly. Entire ecosystems perished slowly, like a species trying to breathe underwater. The Earth was not cruel. It was simply changing, responding to the accumulation of possibility. Life that could not adapt faded. Life that could evolve persisted. And all the while, the sky began its long transformation. The haze started to thin. Methane, once abundant, reacted with the rising oxygen and was gradually stripped from the atmosphere. The sun still burned as it always had, but now its light began to scatter in new ways. Rayleigh scattering, the bending of short blue wavelengths of light by atmospheric particles, slowly became possible, and after millions of years of invisibility, the color blue emerged above the planet. It did not appear overnight. It crept in softly, like the first stars in a dusky sky. That first blue sky might have been an event without witnesses. Perhaps only the drifting cyanobacteria and the shallow mats of microbial life caught its hue, refracted through rippling surface waves. But from that point forward, the Earth began to resemble something more familiar. Still alien, still in flux, but with a sky whose color hinted at the world to come. As you lie here, sinking into sleep, imagine looking up into that changing sky. The world is still harsh. There are no trees to shade your view, no birds to draw your gaze. But there it is, a pale, timid blue breaking through the haze. It's a fragile thing, not yet permanent, not yet trusted, but it's a beginning. And beginnings are what the Proterozoic is full of, not dramatic births or sudden flashes of invention, but patient progress, quiet transformation. Life didn't erupt in this eon. It stretched, it adapted, it built slowly, like a melody learned over lifetimes, repeated and refined until it could support harmonies and counterpoints yet to come. So tonight, as your breath softens and your muscles release, think of that sky above the ancient world. Imagine its colorless beginnings, its chemical fog, and the long wait for blue. Let that image linger behind your eyes as you drift, knowing that every color, every breath, every cell that makes you possible came from a time when the world was learning how to be itself. There is no rush. The Proterozoic has time. So do you. Sink now beneath that first uncertain sky, through the calm surface of an ocean that has not yet seen a fish. The water is heavy, almost metallic, holding in suspension a wealth of dissolved minerals, most notably iron. Light from the sun struggles to penetrate far, absorbed and scattered by dense clouds of particles and plankton-sized life. But here in the shallows, where photons still reach, a silent revolution is taking place. These are the green oceans of the early Proterozoic, thick with the breath of ancient microbes, quietly reshaping the world one molecule at a time. There are no coral reefs, no whales passing by in slow arcs, no bubbles from divers breaking the surface. Instead, the sea is still and eerie, colored in hues that shimmer between olive, brown, and red, depending on depth and content. It smells faintly of sulfur and iron, a scent you might find in hot springs or deep caves. If you could float here without fear, you'd find yourself surrounded by organisms invisible to the naked eye, microscopic, ancient, and busy. Busy capturing sunlight, busy altering chemistry, busy in their small way, rewriting the history of the planet. These green waters are ruled by cyanobacteria. They form slick, floating films near the surface and coat rocks in sticky, glistening mats called stromatolites. These layered microbial structures are not only living communities, but also record keepers, trapping grains of sediment in their sticky exudates and growing slowly over time, like microbial sculptures. If you were to run your hand across one, gently, slowly, you'd feel the texture of a colony working together, moving nutrients, exchanging information, and generating the oxygen that will one day make lungs possible. But that oxygen doesn't rise into the sky, not yet. First, it meets the dissolved iron in the ocean. The reaction is inevitable. The oxygen binds with the iron, forming insoluble rust, and the two fall together to the seafloor in a quiet rain of particles. Over millions of years, these mineral drizzles create thick blankets of banded iron formations, some hundreds of meters thick. These deposits are the silent consequence of microbial industry, stacked in rhythmic alternations, iron-rich layers interleaved with silica or carbonate bands, each a mark of fluctuating oxygen levels, seasons, or even planetary shifts. This process would continue until nearly all the free iron in the ocean was used up. Only then, when the seas were exhausted of their iron supply, could oxygen begin to leak into the atmosphere in earnest. But that takes time, longer than human civilization has existed, longer than the continents have held their current names. Millions of years must pass in silence before the sky begins to change, before the chemistry shifts enough to allow the air to sustain animals and fire and breath. Still, there is a peace to these oceans. They are slow, methodical, purposeful. Life does not rush here. It layers itself like paint, like sediment, like thought. In the stillness, it experiments. Some microbes invent new pigments to better absorb sunlight. Others evolve to survive in deeper waters, or in the presence of increasing oxygen, which to them is a reactive, dangerous substance. In this world, change is survival, but the change must come without haste. Above the ocean, the continents are mostly barren. Occasional volcanic eruptions dot the skyline, spreading ash and lava across the landscape, but no forests rise, no animals flee. Rain falls onto dry stone and rushes toward the sea, carrying with it the crushed remains of mountains, the building blocks of future soils. But for now, there is no green on land. The only green is in the ocean, painted by life itself, brushed in strokes so fine you can barely see them, yet powerful enough to reshape the atmosphere. It is easy to forget how long this world remained in such a state. The Proterozoic was not a brief prelude, not a short wait for something more exciting to begin. It lasted 2 billion years. That's nearly half the age of the Earth. During that time, the microbial world was not static. It was steadily innovating. Genes mutated, new metabolic pathways emerged. Organisms learned how to collaborate, how to protect their genetic material, how to process energy more efficiently. These were not small steps. They were revolutions conducted in absolute quiet. Imagine lying on the seafloor where the sunlight barely reaches and watching a community of bacteria pass electrons between one another in a chain of metabolic cooperation. These are not creatures as we understand them. They have no faces, no voices, no limbs, yet they are alive, learning, adapting, building a world in which larger life will someday thrive. They do not know what they are making. They are simply doing what they do, processing sunlight, fixing nitrogen, producing oxygen, dying, dividing, continuing. And through it all, the green persists. Not the green of leaves or moss, but the primal elemental green of iron and algae, of light filtering through thick water. This is the color of Earth in transition, not beautiful by human standards, perhaps, but deeply alive. Now, as you rest in your own stillness, think of these oceans. Imagine their surface calm, their depths busy with invisible conversations. Picture the slow drift of minerals, the rise and fall of microbial tides, the patient rhythm of stromatolites building themselves upward, layer by patient layer. Everything is in motion, but none of it is fast. The planet is not rushing. It is becoming, and you too are not in a hurry. Your thoughts soften, your breath slows. Your body, like the earth, is settling into a rhythm that is quiet and cyclical. With each heartbeat, you drift a little deeper. With each breath, you slip further into the green silence of a world that once was, and that still echoes in every drop of water, every cell that carries oxygen in your veins. You are not separate from this ocean. You are its continuation. You are the dream of these microbes, made flesh and thought. And as you sleep, they whisper to you still, softly, insistently, reminding you that even the smallest lives can shape a planet. Let yourself drift now, deeper still, not downward into pressure and dark, but sideways, gently through time, as if you were floating in a slow current of memory. The green oceans you just left begin to shift in hue, tinged now with something invisible but powerful. Something new is entering the story, not with fanfare or explosion, but like the first light entering a darkened room. Oxygen. Not the oxygen you breathe now, clean, abundant, taken for granted, but a hesitant guest in a world that didn't yet know what it meant to breathe in the modern sense. A molecule made by accident, then persistence, by tiny beings with no faces, no minds, no future in sight. It entered the world slowly, softly, and with each atom it gave away, it changed everything. Imagine oxygen, not as a chemical, but as a whisper. Not a human voice, but a planetary murmur spreading through oceans and air. When cyanobacteria first exhaled it, the oxygen didn't rise like steam. It sank. It met iron and disappeared. It was absorbed, consumed, neutralized. It vanished into reactions and sediments and rusted layers of seafloor. For millions of years, it was a ghost, present but unseen, influential but denied. The great oxygenation event was not an event in the way we usually think of one. There was no sudden change, no moment where the world gasped and became new. It was, instead, a gradual drowning of one era and the slow emergence of another. Oxygen, at that time, was a pollutant. To the dominant life forms of the Archean and early Proterozoic, it was a reactive, corrosive danger. Anaerobic microbes, the ones that had thrived in a world without oxygen, began to decline. Some adapted, fleeing to pockets of the earth where oxygen could not reach, deep muds, vents, aching caves, sediments. Others vanished, becoming extinct as their ancient environment turned to alien. But just as some life was ending, other life was preparing to begin. A new type of cellular machinery, a different kind of resilience, began to evolve. Life that could tolerate oxygen, and eventually, life that could thrive on it. The shift was slow. Imagine an ocean like breath held too long, tension building quietly beneath the surface. For a time, there were fluctuations. Oxygen levels rose, then fell. The earth seemed unsure of itself, as if negotiating a new balance. Perhaps volcanoes poured more carbon dioxide into the air, pushing oxygen back. And perhaps the burial of organic carbon allowed temporary oxygen blooms. But the direction was set. Slowly, the atmosphere changed its flavor. The seas, once green with iron, began to lose their hue. The sky, once filled with haze, began to open. Light scattered differently. New colors were born. New possibilities took root. And all of this, the transformation of the planet's chemistry, the extinction and rise of whole ecosystems, happened through the tireless work of organisms, no larger than a speck of dust. They did not know what they were doing. They did not plan, but their collective breath, their light-driven hunger, their repetition of a simple chemical loop rewrote the fabric of the atmosphere. Now close your eyes, if they're not already closed, and picture this change not as a chart or a graph, but as a story told in rhythm. Imagine the surface of the sea glittering with microbial films, gently swaying as the light of morning passes over them. Every second, a new molecule of oxygen is released. Not a shout, but a whisper, billions of whispers rising through the water like bubbles that no one hears. Most are lost, neutralized by iron, consumed by other reactions. But some make it. They gather, they linger, they wait. Above the oceans, the sky begins to feel the difference. Ozone begins to form, fragile but growing. This layer of protective gas, made of 3 oxygen atoms, forms like a shield in the upper atmosphere, absorbing harmful ultraviolet light. With it comes protection, and with protection comes freedom. Life, long confined to the safety of water, will one day emerge onto land, but not yet. For now, this is a preparation, a pause, a long inhale before the leap. And under all this, the planet stirs. The crust moves, supercontinents form and drift. Rodinia, a great landmass, begins to assemble through slow collisions. Mountains rise and erode, rivers carry sediments into seas. The stage is being set, but the actors are still small, still quiet, still simple. There is something humbling about this part of the story. We often look for drama in our history, explosions, extinctions, sudden appearances of complexity. But here, in the deep Proterozoic, change comes in whispers. The world is not static, but it is patient. It builds the conditions for life's eventual flowering with careful slowness. The air you breathe now is a product of that patience. And isn't sleep a bit like that? A quiet transformation. You lie still, and yet your body repairs. Dreams swirl. Memory is shaped. Nothing loud happens, yet everything changes. So as you lie here, breathing oxygen gifted to you by ancient oceans and tiny bacteria, you are participating in a cycle older than time as we know it. You are resting in the breath of the earth. Let your thoughts soften now. Let your mind stretch back across these eons, like a wave sliding across the surface of the sea. Feel the steadiness of it, the slow power, the endless patience. The great oxygenation whisper has never really stopped. It continues now in every green leaf, in every wave, in every cell of your body, converting food into energy. You are part of this story. You are part of that breath, and so is the night. In the deep hush of Earth's middle age, the oceans breathe out one molecule at a time, and the world begins to turn the color of blood, not in violence, not in pain, but in chemistry, slow, relentless chemistry. Oxygen, still new and uncertain in this ancient world, finds iron waiting in the water. And the meeting is immediate, inevitable. Iron dissolved in seawater for eons, invisible and abundant, greets oxygen as a partner and a rival. The result is rust, iron oxide, precipitating out of the green waters and sinking downward, layering itself across the seafloor in soft, reddish blankets. It is not an explosion, not a catastrophe, but a quiet rain of color falling slowly over millions of years. And so close your eyes and imagine it, a planet rusting from the inside out, not all at once, but day by day, tide by tide. Beneath shallow sunlit waters, vast plains of iron-rich sediment begin to accumulate. In some places, they appear as ripples and waves of texture across the bottom. In others, they press down into deeper basins, collecting in rhythmic layers. Each layer a record of breath, each stratum a page in a silent book written in red and gray, iron and silica, chemistry and time. These are the banded iron formations, stripes of history preserved in stone. Some are hundreds of meters thick, stretching across entire continents, now exposed in ancient mountain faces or quarried for steel. But long before human eyes ever traced their lines, they formed under oceans lit only by a pale sun, in waters stirred by winds that whispered through an unrecognizable atmosphere. They are the fossilized exhalations of cyanobacteria, not bones or shells or teeth, but chemical signatures of life reshaping a planet. It's almost strange, isn't it, that rust, a sign of decay in our modern world, was once a symbol of birth. The Earth in the Proterozoic was not breaking down. It was building up. It was being scrubbed clean, layer by layer, preparing for something it had never seen before. The great rusting of the oceans signaled not death, but the beginning of possibility. When the iron was gone from the water, locked into the seafloor, the oxygen no longer had anything to react with. It lingered instead. It built up in the atmosphere, slowly, quietly, permanently. But this process was not smooth. There were setbacks, fluctuations, hesitations. The iron didn't run out all at once. The oxygen didn't rise in a straight line. Instead, Earth entered a cycle, a dance between production and limitation. When cyanobacteria bloomed in great numbers, oxygen increased, iron precipitated, and the water cleared. But as iron levels dropped, cyanobacteria found themselves competing for nutrients. Sometimes, oxygen levels fell again. The planet seesawed between different states of equilibrium, as though unsure of the world it wanted to become. And still the rust fell, like a snowfall of minerals, like an invisible rain of transformation. It coated the ocean floor in hues that no eyes had yet evolved to see. It prepared the world for what would come later: animals, plants, lungs, fire, all the things that required free oxygen to exist. But they were still impossibly far away. The Proterozoic Earth did not rush. It moved with tectonic slowness, sculpting the future grain by grain. Now picture yourself lying at the bottom of one of these ancient seas. You're weightless in a gentle current. The water is murky, tinged red by suspended particles. Above you, a veil of microbial mats floats, filtering sunlight into filtered golds and greens. You don't hear anything, not because there is no sound, but because time itself has slowed to a hum. There are no predators, no screams, no splashes, just the subtle clink of mineral settling upon mineral, a sound like sleep itself. The oxygen continues to build, molecule by patient molecule. In the atmosphere, its presence begins to change the chemistry of rainfall, of weathering, of rivers. Rocks on land start to break down differently, releasing phosphorus and other nutrients into the sea. This, in turn, feeds the microbes, which produce more oxygen, which causes more weathering, a feedback loop of quiet acceleration. The Earth is not just resting. It is learning how to cycle, how to breathe, how to sustain itself. We do not know exactly when the oceans lost their green, nor when the sky turned fully blue. These were not singular moments. They were gradients, fogs lifting in stages, changes we can only measure by comparing layers of rock now billions of years old. But what we do know is that the banded iron formations eventually stopped, the rusting ended, the iron was gone, and in its absence, oxygen finally began to rise without limit. This moment, when the last of the free iron fell from seawater, is one of the quietest revolutions in the planet's history. It marked the end of an oceanic era and the beginning of an atmospheric one. From that point on, Earth would never be the same. The atmosphere thickened with a new element. The sky grew clearer. The stars, for the first time, might have twinkled through ozone-filtered air. Photosynthesis had succeeded. The breath of microbes had redefined the planet's boundaries. And all of it, every molecule of oxygen in your blood, every lungful of air you take without thinking, can be traced back to this time. The rust on ancient rocks, the microbes in shallow seas, the green oceans that turned to red sediment. These are not stories of things that happened long ago and then ended. These are still unfolding within you. Your body is a timeline. Your breath is part of this deep history. So as you exhale now, slowly and softly into the dark room around you, imagine you are part of that ancient rhythm. Inhale like a cyanobacterium greeting the morning light. Exhale like the ocean, releasing rust to the depths. Your breath, though, carries the memory of this time, the whisper of a world discovering itself. Sleep some now, inside that memory. Let it carry you, not down, but back, not inward, but across time. The rusting has ended, the sky is ready to open, and the earth, it's still turning beneath your pillow, has so much more to show you. Now let the world grow colder around you, not suddenly, not violently, but as if the planet were gently pulling a blanket over its own body. Imagine a slow dimming of light, the breath of clouds thickening, the sky turning from pale blue to silvery gray, and the oceans sighing beneath a veil of forming ice. This is not a nightfall, not a season. It is an age of stillness, a slowness deeper than any winter you've known. The earth, despite its molten heart and churning mantle, begins to shiver. Its surface contracts beneath the chill. The continents rest under frost. The equator loses its warmth. The oceans begin to freeze. This is the long freeze, the snowball Earth hypothesis come to life, not as a shock, but as a whisper, the same kind of planetary breath that once rusted the oceans, now exhaling cold across land and sea. You mustn't think of it like a storm or an ice age drawn in sudden brushstrokes. This was a painting of millions of years, layer upon layer of cooling, feedback loops slipping out of balance. As oxygen filled the atmosphere and greenhouse gases like methane were pulled away or broken down by ultraviolet light and chemical reactions, Earth's thermal blanket thinned. And under that thinning blanket, heat escaped. At first, glaciers crept down from polar regions, advancing inch by inch over highlands and coasts. Snow reflected sunlight, cooling the surface further. Ice spread. As it expanded, it brightened the planet, reflecting even more solar energy back into space. A positive feedback loop. The more ice, the colder the Earth became. And then, somewhere along this long path of descent, the tipping point was reached. Glaciers touched the tropics. Ice formed near the equator. The oceans, vast and deep, began to seal themselves under kilometers of frozen skin. Imagine that. An entire ocean beneath ice, beneath silence, beneath darkness. No whale songs, no breaking waves, no flickering moonlight on water, just sheets of frost stretching across the globe, a frozen mirror reflecting a sun that offered no reprieve. Earth may have been locked in this state for millions of years at a time. And yet even here, even in this deepest stillness, life did not stop. Beneath the ice, the oceans remained liquid, warmed by geothermal heat, stirred by thermal gradients, fed by volcanic vents on the seafloor. In these hidden waters, microbial life persisted, not flourished, but endured. Stromatolites may have continued growing, protected under cracks in the ice, where light could still filter through. Chemosynthetic bacteria clung to hydrothermal vents, using chemical gradients rather than sunlight to fuel their quiet metabolism. Life had seen worse. Life adapted. Think now of what it means for a planet to freeze, not just physically, but emotionally. The stillness that overtakes the world in this age is not a punishment. It is a pause, a preservation, as if Earth, having released oxygen into the skies and stripped iron from its seas, needed a moment to breathe, to hold itself still, to incubate. Under the white crust, the rhythms continued, just slower, just dimmed. The Earth was not dead. It was dreaming. And in that dream, strange things were happening. Volcanoes continued to erupt beneath the ice, sending carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, though it could not accumulate quickly enough to warm the world. At first, over time, this greenhouse gas began to build, as silicate weathering, the process that usually draws CO2 out of the atmosphere, had slowed nearly to a halt with all the land locked under frost. So the carbon dioxide stayed, slowly, quietly, accumulating year after patient year. Eventually, after perhaps tens of millions of years, the blanket began to return, not of ice, but of warmth. The tipping point reversed. The greenhouse effect reawakened. The snowball began to melt, not in a flood, not with thunder, but like a dream evaporating at dawn. The ice receded. Glaciers withdrew. The oceans exhaled. The sky, once pale with frozen clouds, cleared and brightened. Sunlight danced again across open water. Rain returned to land. Rivers carved anew. Earth, thawing from its long hibernation, began to breathe more deeply. And the organisms that had endured, those tucked into thermal vents, sheltered in brine pockets beneath ice, clinging to the underside of glaciers, these survivors would inherit a different planet. Oxygen levels had risen during the freeze. Nutrients stored in ice and rock were flushed into the oceans during the melt. New ecological niches were born in the rush and churn of meltwater and rebounding seas. Life, once huddled in the dark, began to spread again, to experiment, to test new forms. But in this moment, as you lie quietly and let your breath rise and fall, you are still in the deep of that long freeze. You are wrapped, like the earth, in a stillness that is not empty but expectant. The weight of the covers on your body mimics the pressure of kilometers of ice over ocean. The darkness in your room mirrors the absence of sunlight beneath glacial crust. And just as your thoughts begin to slow, to drift into the shapes of dreams, so too did Earth begin to shape the next dream of life. You might feel in this moment a sense of distance, of how far we are from this time, how different we are from these microbes, this frozen world. But the calcium in your bones, the oxygen in your lungs, the heat that keeps your body alive, all of it passed through that stillness. All of it was refined, like breath behind glass, through that long and gentle freeze. Let the snow fall now in your imagination. Let the surface grow white. Let the silence stretch wide and deep. The earth is resting, and so are you. Drift now below that heavy crust of silence where sunlight never reaches, and the pressure of the frozen world above feels eternal. Here, beneath kilometers of ice, in darkness untouched by day or night, the ocean remains, a world unto itself, shielded from the stillness above, stirred only by heat rising from the planet's heart. You are in a place that few imagine, and none have seen, but one that harbored life when the surface of the earth had gone quiet. A secret, flickering candle beneath a bed of stone-cold snow. This is not the vibrant reef of a tropical sea, nor the wide open blue of modern oceans. It is more like a cradle, a quiet sanctuary cloaked in dark. Down here, beneath the frozen ceiling, the water does not freeze. Geothermal energy, heat flowing from the Earth's molten interior, keeps it fluid. Vents open along the ridges of tectonic plates, releasing plumes of mineral-rich steam into the water, forming black smokers and white chimneys, sculpted in steaming breath. It is here, in these creases of the ocean floor, that life gathers, not just as a relic of warmer times, but as a strategy for endurance. Imagine a bacterial colony near one of these vents. The water around it is pitch black, but teeming with invisible chemistry. Hydrogen sulfide bubbles up from the Earth's interior and meets oxygen or nitrate in the water, triggering energy-releasing reactions. Chemosynthetic microbes absorb this energy, not through sunlight, but through chemical bonds. They convert inorganic molecules into fuel, and in doing so, they become the foundation of ecosystems that require no light at all. Around them, simple animals, perhaps early versions of worms or sponge-like forms, find nourishment. This is a food web born not from photosynthesis, but from rock and gas and heat. Even away from the vents, life persists. Tiny creatures float through briny pockets, trapped between layers of ice and water, surviving in slits no thicker than a blade of grass. Some adapt to extreme pressure, others to low temperatures or minimal nutrients. In these quiet corners, evolution does not stop. It simply slows, folds inward, becomes more patient. Mutations still arise. Natural selection still whispers its preferences. Life listens. Life adjusts. Life continues. Above, the ice reflects sunlight into space. Entire continents lie entombed in glaciers. The oceans are capped, silent, invisible from orbit. But beneath all this, the microbial world endures. It experiments in solitude. It maintains the heartbeat of the biosphere, even as the world slumbers. It is like a lullaby hummed by someone who refuses to stop singing, even when no one seems to be listening. This endurance is not only a feat of biology, it is also a lesson in resilience. We often think of life as fragile, easily broken, scattered by storms or frozen by cold. But here, in the heart of Earth's most extreme freeze, life demonstrates its deeper truth. It is persistent, tenacious, willing to bend rather than break. The story of life beneath the ice is a story of patience rewarded, not in years or centuries, but in epochs. Let yourself feel that patience now. Breathe in slowly. Let the air settle in your lungs like deep ocean water settling into trenches. You are not in a hurry. Your heartbeat is a metronome tuned to geological time. You do not need the sun to shine or the weather to change. You simply endure, quietly, with purpose. Above you, the world may seem uninhabitable, but that is only a surface illusion. So much of life happens unseen, not just beneath ice, but beneath notice. We forget sometimes how much strength resides in silence. In your own life, too, there are times of stillness, not stagnation, but gestation. Periods where growth is invisible, buried beneath uncertainty, masked by quiet. But underneath, things shift, new pathways form. What survives the cold will flourish in the thaw. Back on the ancient seafloor, microbial mats continue to produce oxygen in whatever slivers of light reach them. Chemoautotrophs continue their slow work of turning raw minerals into nourishment. The Earth's inner heat pulses upward, creating currents that prevent total stagnation. The oceans do not go stagnant. They murmur under the ice, a slow stirring that keeps the planet's blood moving. Eventually, this persistence will matter. Eventually, the world will change again. The carbon dioxide from volcanic eruptions will build. The greenhouse effect will return. The glaciers will crack, melt, withdraw. Oceans will reawaken. Sunlight will pour back into waters that haven't seen it in millions of years. But none of that would be possible. None of that future would matter if life had not chosen to wait here, beneath the ice. So as you lie in your own stillness now, eyes closed, limbs heavy, brain floating somewhere between wakefulness and dream, you are aligned with this chapter of Earth. You are not frozen. You are preserving. You are not stalled. You are resting before renewal. Let your breath be the geothermal warmth beneath your own skin. Let your heartbeat be the silent pulse of an ancient sea. Let the darkness hold you, not as an absence, but as a shelter. There is no need to hurry. Earth didn't, life didn't, and look what became possible. Beneath the silence of ice and the breath of ancient oceans, there is a deeper rhythm still, a pulse so slow it escapes sensation, yet powerful enough to reshape the face of the earth. This is the heartbeat of tectonics, the vast and silent circulation of stone that stirs the mantle and lifts continents like sleepwalkers from the sea. Long before forests covered hills, long before animals walked or wind sculpted canyons, the continents moved to a rhythm deeper than memory, grinding, folding, splitting, drifting across a world no human eye had yet seen. This was not movement as we know it, sudden, explosive, violent, but movement on the scale of dreams, of the slow curl of fingers in sleep, of breathing mountains into being over hundreds of millions of years. You might imagine the Earth's crust as fixed, solid, unmoving beneath your feet, but that's only a trick of human time. In the Proterozoic, the land did not rest. Supercontinents assembled and dissolved, colliding and parting in cycles so long they blurred the meaning of direction. One such ancient gathering was Columbia, perhaps the first of Earth's great supercontinents, forming around 2 billion years ago, its fragments pulled together by the inexorable flow of heat from the planet's interior. Land masses met and stitched themselves along sutures of metamorphosed rock, scars that still run through our continents today. Mountains rose where plates collided, scraping the sky, only to erode again over eons, their sediment swept away by water, then pressed into stone. After Columbia came Rodinia, the next great convergence of land. Around 1.1 billion years ago, continents moved again toward one another, nudged by mantle convection, the slow churning of semi-solid rock far below. These collisions weren't sudden. They unfolded over tens of millions of years as the Pacifics and Atlantics of that time squeezed shut, and mountain chains were folded upward from ocean floor. You might think of this as a slow embrace, massive, grinding, and gentle only by geological standards. It was Earth turning itself inward, reshaping the lines of coastlines that would one day define maps still unimagined. And between these supercontinent cycles, the planet exhaled. Heat trapped beneath massive land masses built pressure until rifts opened like slow wounds, releasing basaltic floods and sundering the once unified crust. Rodinia eventually broke apart, just as Columbia had before it. The pieces drifted into new arrangements, opening vast inland seas, altering ocean currents, shifting climates. Each rearrangement of continents redrew the Earth's face and redirected the flow of energy, atmosphere, and water across its surface. The planet, like a restless sleeper, could not stay still for long. These tectonic movements were more than geology. They were also invitations to life. When continents collide, mountain chains form and weather, releasing minerals that wash into the sea, nourishing microbial ecosystems. When continents break apart, they create new coastlines, new shallow seas, warm lagoons rich in light and nutrients. Life responds, always. It expands when given the chance, adapts to changing conditions, and transforms those very conditions in return. This dance between rock and cell, between tectonics and biology, is older than forests and more enduring than any single species. You might wonder, as you lie still and quiet now, how motion so slow could matter to something so soft as life. But it is in this slowness that life finds room to grow. Mountains that rise become cradles for future rivers. Valleys carved by ancient glaciers become pathways for migration. Oceans that open with the splitting of continents become incubators for evolution. Time and pressure, movement and stillness. These are the ingredients of the planet's long alchemy, and you are made from their results. And beneath it all, always, is the pulse. Not one you can hear or feel, but one the earth never forgets. Every plate boundary, every ridge, every fault line is part of the circulatory system. Heat rises from the mantle, pushing material upward at spreading centers, where new crust forms like skin over a wound. Elsewhere, at subduction zones, old crust sinks back into the interior, melting and becoming part of the cycle again. Creation and consumption, rise and return. A balance struck not in decades or centuries, but in the language of eons. Let yourself feel now for just a moment the weight and wonder of this continuity. The ground beneath you, though it seems immovable, was once part of a sea floor, a mountain range, a volcanic arc. It has moved across the globe, slowly, silently. It has carried forests, deserts, glaciers, and seas. It has borne the bones of trilobites and dinosaurs, the footprints of early hominins, the cities of today, and it will keep moving long after all that is familiar has changed. Even your own body is touched by this tectonic tale. The calcium in your bones was once locked in stone, freed by weathering and washed to the sea, where it joined life, passed from shell to soil to bloodstream. The iron in your blood echoes the ancient rust of oceans turned red. You carry within you the legacy of a planet in motion, shaped by forces that never sleep. So as you rest now, safe and still beneath your own blanket of stars, imagine the continents moving beneath you, not fast, not urgently, but with purpose. Imagine the earth turning, rearranging itself, not in haste, but in harmony. You are lying not just on a planet, but inside a story that moves even when it seems still. Let your breath match that motion. Let your dreams drift along tectonic tides. The crust may be cold, but the mantle stirs. The plates may drift, but the pulse continues. Now follow the pulse inward into the tiny trembling worlds that drift in ancient oceans, so small they escape the eye, yet so vital they change the course of everything that will come. Float down beneath the waves, past the mineral haze, past the mats of bacteria clinging to stone, into the soft diffusion of microbial life where something is stirring, invisible but monumental. In this gentle world, simple cells, prokaryotes as we call them now, have ruled for billions of years. They are small, efficient, self-contained. But in the long hush of the Proterozoic, something new begins to form, not through conquest, but through collaboration. A membrane folds inward, a partnership is struck, and from this quiet event, the nucleus is born. You might imagine that something as fundamental as complex life began with drama, with fire, with speed. But no, what emerges instead is a kind of intimacy, a closeness that defies simplicity. A single cell absorbs another, not as prey, but as companion. One becomes part of the other, and inside that larger cell, the engulfed guest continues to live, to breathe, to provide energy. Over generations, it loses its independence. Its genome shrinks. It no longer wanders on its own. It becomes mitochondria, the powerhouse of future cells, the inherited ember of a relationship so ancient that even now in your own cells, you carry its memory. This moment, this merging of two beings into one, is not a singular spark. It likely happened many times in many ways before it became stable, but eventually it stuck. And with that, a new kind of cell was born, the eukaryote. Larger, more complex, structured with compartments, protected by a nucleus that shelters DNA behind a double membrane. This isn't just a better version of what came before. It is a new kind of architecture, an interior world within a microscopic boundary, like a city where information, energy, and purpose flow through specialized corridors. These new cells could do things their simpler cousins could not. They could organize, coordinate, grow larger, store more genetic instructions, build new forms. They were still floating in oceans that knew no plants or animals, but they carried within them the architecture that would one day make every tree, every animal, every human possible. And yet, they drifted without announcement, multiplying quietly across the dark sea. Their birth did not herald fanfare. The world above them did not yet care. But life had changed forever. Imagine yourself now, drifting alongside one of these ancient cells. To your dreaming mind, it might look like a glowing orb, its outer membrane pulsing gently, translucent, and serene. Inside, the nucleus shimmers like a pearl, dense with information, long spirals of code coiled into chromosomes, protected and curated. Nearby, the mitochondrion flickers, busy and tireless, converting chemical energy into fuel, keeping the cell alive in an ocean where pressure and time weigh more than gravity. There is no brain, no intent, but there is direction, there is structure, there is balance. The emergence of eukaryotes was not limited to the invention of nuclei and mitochondria. These cells soon developed internal skeletons, scaffolding made of protein that allowed them to maintain shapes, to move in deliberate ways, to divide more efficiently. They evolved ways to ingest other cells through endocytosis, to store food, to respond to chemical signals. They became more interactive, more dynamic. They were not just surviving. They were adapting to a broader range of environments. And slowly, they diversified. We often speak of the Cambrian explosion as the dawn of animal life. But the groundwork, the roots of that blossom, began here, in this age of microbial innovation. Without eukaryotes, there would be no complex organisms, no plants, no funguses, no animals. All of them descend from this lineage. You, in your sleep, are not just dreaming of ancient oceans. You are dreaming the dreams of eukaryotes, your cells still speaking the language they first learned over 1 billion years ago. And this moment in the Earth's story also carries something else, something philosophical. The merging of two separate beings into one harmonious whole is not just biology, it is metaphor. Cooperation is older than conflict. Partnership, older than war. The very fact that your cells function is due to an act of ancient union. You are, quite literally, the product of a relationship that endured. As tectonic plates shifted above and glacial periods ebbed and returned, these cells floated on, proliferating through currents, settling in sediments, evolving subtle new strategies. Some learned to photosynthesize, forming algae. Others formed the base of food webs that had not yet been written. Their complexity allowed for communication, for specialization, for the first steps toward multicellularity, a story that will come soon, but not yet. Tonight, you don't need to rush ahead. You're still floating in this deep chapter of cellular awakening. Let your breath mirror the rhythm of these ancient lives, inhaling gently as they absorb nutrients, exhaling slowly as they divide. Your body is built from trillions of their descendants, and your dreams are filled with their quiet resilience. You are not separate from them. You are them, extended and reimagined. And so the earth turns slowly beneath you, as it always has. Its oceans cradle new beginnings. Its mantle stirs. Its atmosphere thickens with the breath of photosynthesizers. And somewhere, beneath the microscope of deep time, a nucleus gleams in the watery dark, protecting the code that will one day teach trees how to grow, whales how to sing, and humans how to remember. Float now in that invisible tide, where identities begin to blur, where boundaries dissolve not in conflict, but in trust. In the ancient oceans of the Proterozoic, life is discovering something profound. Not competition, not predation, but collaboration at a level so deep it becomes inseparable. This is the realm of symbiosis, not as metaphor or lesson, but as the engine of biological transformation. It is the quiet intimacy of living together, not side by side, but within, one life folded into another, two entities learning to breathe as one. Symbiosis is not always peace. It begins awkwardly, like strangers occupying the same small room. One cell engulfs another, and the smaller cell resists at first. It is foreign, displaced, vulnerable, but something changes. Instead of digesting the guest, the host allows it to live. The guest, for its part, offers something in return, perhaps energy, protection, a metabolic advantage. Over time, what began as engulfment becomes entwinement. The host and the guest begin to adapt to one another's presence. Their genes start to coordinate. Signals are exchanged. Walls thin, barriers soften. What once were two become one. This is how mitochondria came to be, descendants of free-living bacteria who found a second life as energy producers inside eukaryotic cells. But the story does not end there. Later, another act of symbiosis would occur. Certain cells engulfed photosynthetic bacteria, and once again, instead of consuming them, they kept them alive. These photosynthetic guests eventually became chloroplasts, the green engines of plant cells, converting sunlight into sugars, capturing light and weaving it into the architecture of life. Every leaf, every blade of grass, every tree owes its color and its breath to this union. Think about that now, in the quiet of your room, your body soft under blankets, your mind adrift. Deep within you, mitochondria still work, still burn fuel to power your cells. They are not passive passengers. They have their own DNA, their own ancient memories. They are not yours in the usual sense. They are guests who never left, whose usefulness has made them family. And if you step outside tomorrow and feel sunlight warming your skin, or see green shimmering through the canopy, Know that chloroplasts, too, are the product of ancient trust. Without these quiet partnerships, there would be no forests, no flowers, no food. Without symbiosis, life might never have stepped beyond the bacterial stage. In this way, the Earth in the Proterozoic was not just experimenting with complexity, it was discovering cooperation. It was learning that survival did not always require defense, that success could mean living inside another, letting go of isolation. Cells began to work together, not just temporarily, but permanently. Genes moved from the symbiont to the host nucleus, locking the relationship into place. Dependencies formed, intertwining became inheritance. And this, perhaps, is where the path toward multicellularity truly begins. Not in cells simply clumping together, but in the logic of integration, of shared purpose. If a cell can carry another inside it, can coordinate its function, can rely on it completely, then perhaps it can also begin to coordinate with other cells like itself, not just as a colony, but as a body. But that story is still coming. For now, the intimacy of symbiosis continues in the oceans, across drifting eukaryotic lineages, each carrying within them whispers of ancient agreements. Let your breath match this intimacy now. Inhale with the rhythm of mitochondria. Exhale with the patience of chloroplasts. They have endured more time than any nation, any species, any mountain range. They are inside you, quietly alive, transforming oxygen and sugars into energy, night and day, without pause. You are not alone, even at the cellular level. Your very being is a community, and symbiosis stretches beyond the boundaries of a single cell. As eukaryotes spread, they begin to inhabit new environments, forming relationships not only within, but with the world around them. Algae and fungi form lichens that colonize bare rock, slowly producing the first hints of soil. Microbes and minerals develop interdependencies in biofilms. Even now, bacteria in your own body aid in digestion, produce vitamins to train your immune system. You are not one, you are many. And the Earth was learning this long before animals existed. We often imagine evolution as a ladder, each step an individual climbing upward alone. But the Proterozoic reveals a different shape. Not a ladder, but a web, a nest, a set of overlapping hands reaching into one another, forming networks where survival is not about independence, but about relationship. And those relationships are fragile, flexible, ever-changing. What begins in tension ends in harmony. What starts in engulfment becomes home. As you lie here, let yourself soften into this idea. You are not a fortress. You are a garden. You are built from partnerships. Your body is not merely yours. It is the sum of ancient negotiations. The warmth in your chest, the thoughts behind your eyes, the rhythm of your breath, all of it echoes a billion-year-old agreement between different forms of life, choosing to live together rather than apart. So sleep now, not as an individual, but as a symphony. Drift as a community of cells, each humming in quiet coordination. The ocean still cradles the descendants of those first unions. The air still carries the breath of ancient chloroplasts. And inside you, mitochondria still glow like tiny stars, feeding your dreams with energy drawn from the oldest pact life ever made. Drift now through shallow waters where sunlight filters softly, not yet met by swaying kelp or darting fins, but by rippling mats of life so quiet, so simple, they seem more like breathing fabrics than organisms. This is a world not yet sculpted by creatures with legs or shells, but one woven together by layers of living cells, bacteria, algae, and eukaryotic pioneers clinging to one another across stone and silt. It is not a world of individual bodies, but of collective membranes, slow and sprawling. The age of multicellularity is beginning, but not in grand gestures. It arrives, as always in the Proterozoic, as a murmur. Multicellularity did not begin as intention. No master design dictated that cells should join together to form organisms. Rather, it emerged from convenience, then persistence, then necessity. Some cells failed to separate fully after dividing. Others formed colonies for protection or efficiency, staying close because proximity brought shared nutrients and safety. Over time, certain cells within these clusters began to specialize, to divide labor, to perform different roles. One cell filtered light, another digested, another moved, and in that division of tasks, the collective grew more than the sum of its parts. Picture now a wide, shallow tidal basin, its floor slick with biofilm. The sun skims low on the horizon, casting a copper haze over water, rippling like silk. You float just above the surface, watching sheets of microbial life stretch out in patches that move with the wind and tide. Among them, some colonies are changing. Not in shape, there are no bones, no limbs, but in purpose. Cells begin to coordinate, to pass signals, to form primitive tissues. These are not yet animals, not yet plants, but they are more than one. They are many, acting as one. This transformation took place not once, but many times, in many lineages. In the deep folds of algae, in the branching forms of fungal precursors, in the soft, gelatinous mats that blanketed stone, multicellularity was tried and retried, failing often, succeeding occasionally. It was not a singular leap, but a slow crawl, a series of evolutionary experiments unfolding over hundreds of millions of years, each one pushing the limits of cooperation. Even now, multicellularity is not a singular state, but a spectrum. Some organisms live their lives as single cells and then form collectives only to reproduce. Others live as permanent aggregates, their cells unable to survive alone. The boundary between single and multi is porous, shifting, and this ambiguity is part of life's brilliance, not drawing hard lines, but exploring the spaces between. In those early multicellular forms, the world remained largely soft. There were no skeletons, no teeth, no exoskeletons to carve fossil impressions into stone. The bodies of these organisms were delicate, impermanent, their traces erased with the passing of each tide. The seafloor was a canvas brushed clean again and again. But even if we cannot find their shapes, we see their influence in chemical signatures, in subtle changes in sediment, in the altered flow of energy across ecosystems. Life was beginning to sculpt the earth with its own growing complexity. And yet this was still a shadowed world. Light did not penetrate far, and there were no eyes to see it. Movement was slow, governed by diffusion, cilia, the twitch of flagella. There were no hunters yet, no prey, no mouths, no screams, no running. This was a world without violence, not because it was gentle, but because it was early. The concept of harm had not yet been born. Still, the foundations were being laid. Adhesion proteins evolved, allowing cells to stick together more tightly. Communication pathways developed, so cells could coordinate growth and repair. Apoptosis, programmed cell death, arose, allowing organisms to prune unnecessary parts, to shape themselves from within. These are not features of chaos. They are the early fingerprints of design, not imposed but discovered, not dictated but inherited from millions of silent choices, each one building on the last. You may not feel it as you lie here now, the weight of blankets pressing gently against your body, your breath slow and steady, but your own being is built from this ancient decision. Your skin, your organs, your nerves, and blood and bones. Every part of you is the result of cells choosing to be more than solitary. You are not a singular thing. You are an echo of that collective experiment. Let yourself soften into this knowledge. There is no need for clarity in this dream space. The past is not a line, it is a delta, branching, braiding, winding through possibilities. You are part of one of those branches, but the others still flow somewhere, silent and strange. In some tide pool, some billion-year-old estuary, multicellular life formed and faded, leaving behind no bones, no fossils, only influence. And in others, it persisted, moving forward toward eyes and limbs and thoughts that would one day try to understand their own beginnings. The Proterozoic remains a world of slime and shadows. There are no forests yet, no vertebrates, no speech. But there is music, not audible, not composed, but a deep molecular rhythm, cells syncing to one another, waves of division, whispers of coordination. And you, resting now, are tuned to that same rhythm. Your breath is its tempo. Your dreams are its resonance. Sleep deeper now as the shadows thicken around you. The world is still soft, but its shapes are beginning to hold. The future waits, but the present, the slow, living present, is still enough. Let the warmth of multicellular breath cradle you. Let the tide of time carry you forward, not in a rush, but in a lull. Float now into the last stretch of the Proterozoic, as if gliding through a soft mist at the edge of sleep. The world has changed, not suddenly, not dramatically, but with the same patience that has defined every chapter of this long eon. The silence of slime is now stirred by something new, something shaped not by chaos or violence, but by the murmur of form. In these shallow seas, where light finally penetrates with clarity, life begins to decorate the ocean floor with shapes, leaf-like, feathered, quilted. Creatures appear not to hunt or flee, but to lie still, to drift, to grow. This is the Ediacaran period, and the sea has become a canvas painted with living lace. The Ediacaran Beata are like dreams sculpted in flesh. Their forms are unfamiliar, not just to us, but even to the rules we now know. They are not plants, though some resemble ferns. They are not animals as we understand them, yet they move, they grow, they interact. Some lie flat against the seabed like pressed leaves. Others rise into the water column, gently swaying with currents, shaped like ovals, discs, fronds, or branching fans. Dickinsonia, Sprigina, Charniodiscus, names given by paleontologists to creatures whose ways of life remain mysterious. They left no teeth, no shells, no bones. But in the fine-grained mud of ancient seafloors, they left imprints so delicate they seem whispered rather than carved. Imagine kneeling on that seabed, the water around you clear and motionless. You reach out your hand, and instead of finding sand or stone, your fingers graze a soft-bodied organism stretched wide like a patterned tapestry, pulsing faintly, responding not with movement, but with subtle changes of texture. There are no eyes watching you, no fins darting by, only the slow undulations of forms that have no front or back, No obvious mouths or limbs, no clear symmetry beyond their elegant simplicity. They are not here to compete. They are here to be. And yet, within their strange stillness lies a revelation. For the first time, life has filled space with shape. The Ediacaran world is not just layers of microbial mat or filaments drifting unseen. It is textured. It is three-dimensional. It holds pattern, structure, elegance. These organisms do not merely survive. They decorate. They expand the vocabulary of life beyond the microscopic. They do not chase, but they explore, slowly, subtly, how to occupy space. Some may have absorbed nutrients directly through their skin, lying across mats of microbes like living blankets. Others may have filtered particles from the water or harnessed sunlight with internal symbionts. We cannot say for sure. Their bodies offer few clues, but we know they were here. Their fossils appear in South Australia, Newfoundland, Namibia, and Russia, etched in sandstone, preserved like soft sighs captured in ancient mud. These imprints tell us that life had entered a new phase, not just existing, but expressing, not just persisting, but beginning to compose. And yet, the Ediacaran biota do not look forward with certainty. They are not the direct ancestors of most modern animals. Many vanished at the end of the Proterozoic, leaving no lineage, no heirs. Their presence is like a song that echoes only briefly across the vast plain of time. Beautiful, essential, but ephemeral. Some may have hinted at bilateral symmetry. Others may have hinted at nervous systems or muscle fibers. But for many, their lineage ends in the rock. Their gift is not continuity. It is possibility. Let yourself sink into that idea now as your breath slows and your body becomes part of the stillness. Not all things last. Not all beauty becomes legacy. Some exist only to soften the space, to show what could be, to plant the seed of complexity, even if they do not see it bloom. You too contain moments that will not echo into tomorrow, but that still shape the world within you. Thoughts that come and go. Dreams that do not survive the morning, yet change the way you feel forever. The Ediacaran Sea was a place of softness. The ocean floor, once dominated by microbial mats, began to feel the pressure of these new bodies pressing into it, altering its chemistry, disturbing its smoothness. Life was now heavy enough to leave marks, to press down, to change the terrain. The Earth was being shaped by biology, not just on the molecular level, but on the scale of landscape. Life had become not just reactive, but sculptural. And in this soft revolution, time moved differently. The Proterozoic was drawing to a close. The air held more oxygen. The seas became more dynamic. And beneath the water's surface, something was stirring, something that would eventually open its mouth, crawl with limbs, see with eyes. But we are not there yet. For now, we remain in the gentle theater of forms that never roared, never ruled, but merely were. Their legacy is not survival. It is the expansion of what life can be. Let that idea cradle you now as you sleep. You are not made only of those who succeeded, but also of those who tried. Inside your body is the memory of quiet experiments, the softness of forms that came and went, the bravery of becoming without the certainty of continuation. Not every life must lead somewhere to be meaningful. Not every shape must endure to be profound. So lie still now, like an Ediacaran imprint in the sand. Let the waters of time ripple above you. The dreamscape of ancient life stretches wide and silent, a sea of forms glowing gently beneath a rising tide. You are not separate from it. You are sleeping inside it. Now let the tide pull you forward through quiet water, not in haste, but in illumination. A new kind of brightness is seeping into the Proterozoic world, not from within, but from above. For so long, sunlight had been filtered by haze, blocked by atmospheric thickness, absorbed or scattered before it could awaken the deeper layers of the sea. But something has changed. The oxygen that once whispered through the oceans now lives in the air. Ozone forms in the upper atmosphere, delicate and transparent, filtering the sun's harshest rays, and suddenly the light finds its way, not only to the surface, but deeper, clearer, softer. You float now in a world lit with intention. The water is no longer the opaque soup of the early eon, green with iron and sulfur. It is cleared not to tropical blue, but to a kind of pale clarity that lets photons slip gently downward. Photosynthetic organisms rejoice in this light. They stretch their pigments wide to capture the sun's warmth, converting it into sugars and energy. And where once only surface-dwelling bacteria could make use of the sun, now a diversity of eukaryotic algae joins them, complex cells with chloroplasts that shimmer inside their membranes like bottled sunlight. This light changes more than energy flow. It changes structure. Organisms can grow taller now, forming stalks, bladders, fronds, exploring the third dimension of the ocean with bodies shaped by the reach toward light. Some hover just below the surface, balancing between gravity and buoyancy, drawing the light into their cells like a slow internal dawn. Others anchor themselves to rocks and sediments, creating forests in miniature, swaying silently in currents that stir with greater complexity than before. Let your mind imagine it now, a quiet underwater landscape where light filters down in soft columns, cutting gold paths through particulate haze. Here, algae flutter like flags in the deep, not dancing, but responding. The very physics of sunlight now sculpts the biosphere. Energy flows differently. The rhythms of day and night begin to matter. Circadian behaviors, still primitive, still cellular, start to sync with the Earth's spin, tuning life to the sky. The chemistry shifts too. With more oxygen, the oceans become more oxidizing. Elements behave differently. Metabolism can rely on more efficient pathways. Respiration, once constrained by anaerobic limits, expands its reach. Life becomes more energetic, more capable. Cells can grow larger, divide faster, construct more elaborate internal machinery. The pace of evolution, still glacial, begins to tremble with possibility. Above the water, the sky has changed too. Where it was once a veil of haze, it now holds color. The blue of Rayleigh's scattering spreads across the daylight hours. Sunrises and sunsets glow red and orange against the emerging clarity of the atmosphere. For the first time, the Earth might have started to resemble the one we know, not in its species, not in its continents, but in its light. A breathable sky, a luminous sea, an interplay of energy and matter tuned more finely than before. And this light does something else. It calls to life, not with voice or message, but with opportunity. Organisms that sense light begin to move toward it. Primitive eye spots evolve in some cells, patches of pigment sensitive to brightness. These are not yet eyes, not even sight, but the suggestion of perception, the ability to know that there is a direction, a place where more energy waits. Cells swim toward it, orient their bodies, drift into light-rich zones. Navigation begins, not of geography, but of brightness. The instinct to reach toward the source of growth is born. In your own body, remnants of this longing for light still exist. Your circadian rhythm, your seasonal moods, the chemistry of your sleep and waking, all of it responds to light. Not just the brightness, but the timing, the angle, the hue, the legacy of billions of years of photosensitive life still whispers in your blood. And tonight, even as you close your eyes and let the darkness of your room enfold you, your body remembers the rhythm of the sun. So let this be a gentle paradox that you are falling asleep while dreaming of a world awakening. The Proterozoic seas, once dim and choked with haze, are now alive with light. And though the creatures in them are silent, without nervous systems or voices, they move with intention toward light, toward complexity, toward the invisible thread that binds energy to structure, possibility to form. Even the earth itself seems to breathe more freely. With oxygen rising, the crust and mantle respond differently. Weathering patterns shift. Minerals oxidize on land. Rivers carry new elements to the ocean. The geochemical cycles, the quiet arithmetic of atmosphere, lithosphere, and hydrosphere, are recalibrated by the influence of light. Nothing is untouched. Everything listens. Let yourself now be part of that listening, not with ears, but with presence. Your mind need not understand every detail to be part of the song. You are floating, softly, in a planet learning how to shimmer. You are drifting through the earliest moments when light not only existed, but mattered. When it began to shape behaviors, to sculpt ecosystems, to inform decisions. The difference between shade and sun became relevant. The dance of the earth around the sun became meaningful. It is easy, in our age of electric bulbs and glowing screens, to forget how sacred light once was. But in this ancient time, it was precious, limited, earned, and when it came, it was a gift. A signal that life could do more than survive. It could reach. It could build. It could begin to sense the shape of things around it. So breathe now as if you are light sensitive, as if your breath follows the arc of a sunbeam across a quiet sea. Sleep as if you are held in that shallow water, rocked by warmth, curled beneath a world just waking into brightness. And know that even now within you, chloroplasts glow in the cells of green things you eat. Mitochondria hum with stolen sunlight, and your circadian pulse carries the echo of that first illumination. Light has found its way, and it is carrying you forward. Sink now into the hush of a world where life is growing more elaborate, more dimensional, more diverse, and yet still without the hardness we associate with permanence. This is a time before skeletons, before the snap of jaws or the armor of shells. It is a world of softness, of tissue that bends and bruises, of creatures that flow rather than stride. Everything that lives now does so without a skeleton to hold it upright or protect it from harm. It is a time of unarmored life, of pliant forms that leave few traces, whose very fragility makes them difficult to find in the fossil record. And yet, they were there, thick in the water, pressed into the mud, touching the edge of becoming something new. There were no teeth yet, no grinding, no tearing, no biting. There were no predators in the way we think of them, no pursuit, no ambush. The world of the late Proterozoic was one where organisms existed largely without fear of being eaten. Nutrients were absorbed, grazed from microbial mats, or drawn from light and dissolved matter. Life fed not on life, but on what lingered, what drifted, what decayed, what light had left behind. With the absence of predation meant that evolution favored spreading wide, not defending deep. Creatures grew large without needing to be fast. They became complex without needing to be hard. The oceans were filled with ghostly shapes, floating, anchoring, blooming like soft corals, lying still like living quilts. You may think that skeletons are a prerequisite for complexity, but for hundreds of millions of years, life built itself with only the architecture of cells and membranes. Collagen, cytoskeletons, extracellular matrices, all flexible, wet, alive. Bodies that changed shape as they moved, that pulsed rather than stepped, that did not leave behind bones for paleontologists to find. Instead, they left imprints, compressed shadows in the mud, vague outlines where something once rested. And even these rare clues were often erased by time, by pressure, by erosion. The fossil record for this age is a whisper, not a story. But that whisper is enough. It tells us that multicellularity was spreading, that forms were branching, that body plans were beginning to vary, organisms with front and back, top and bottom, some with radial symmetry, others with bilateral hints. Muscles may have begun to twitch in coordinated ways, not as running or swimming, but as movement towards something, a gradient of food, a patch of light, a chemical signal. And with movement comes awareness, not thought, not yet, but sensation. Cells evolved ion channels that allowed them to react, to transmit signals, a whisper of a nervous system just beginning. Still, the softness of this age is what defines it. Creatures did not yet wear the hardness of the future. No bones clattered beneath muscle, no shells crackled underfoot. The seafloor was not littered with discarded armor. It was soft on soft, life touching life in tender proximity. And perhaps there was peace in that. No clawed pursuit, no devouring, just drifting, growing, merging, dying. A world held in suspension before the arms race of evolution began. And yet, this softness should not be mistaken for weakness. To survive without armor is to be adaptable, to change shape, to fit into spaces that rigid forms cannot reach. The organisms of this age were masters of osmosis, diffusion, flow. They managed the movement of ions, the construction of tissues, the balance of fluids. They made decisions without brains, responded to their world without vision. They were not less alive, they were simply earlier. As you lie here now, surrounded by the softness of blankets, your bones cradled in stillness, remember that you too are built from these flexible beginnings. Before your skeleton formed, you were fluid. Before you learned to crawl or walk or stand, you floated. Even now, the core of you is softness, tissues, membranes, signals passed not by steel, but by salt and water. Your bones are temporary. Your softness is older. And in this time before bones, something else was happening. Gene regulation was evolving. Developmental pathways were being written, not by design, but by chance, preserved because they worked. Some cells differentiated and stayed that way. Others triggered the formation of tissues, structures, patterns. Homobox genes, those master regulators of body plan, began to whisper instructions. Not all were followed perfectly. Some led to dead ends, to bodies that never thrived. But others began to produce form, repeated segments, axes of symmetry, the early scripts of shape. This was the scaffolding upon which future animals would build, vertebrates, insects, mollusks. But here in the soft-bodied world of the Proterozoic, it was still malleable. Bodies were not locked into skeletons. They were experiments in becoming. And even though few left their mark in stone, they shaped what came next. Let yourself feel now the comfort of impermanence. Not all that matters is made to last. Some things exist for a moment, for an interval of time in which they are needed, and then they fade, just like these creatures, just like thoughts, just like dreams. You are drifting now among forms that lived gently and passed quietly. Their memory is faint, but their influence is deep. You do not need to hold on to everything to be whole. Sometimes to be soft is to be strong. To leave no fossil is not to have failed. It is simply to have lived in a time where the world had not yet learned to harden. So sleep in this softness. Let the water carry you. Let the mud cradle you. Let the absence of teeth and bone be a comfort. There will come a time for skeletons, for struggle, for structure, but not tonight. Tonight belongs to the formless, the flowing, the creatures who moved without leaving a trace, except in you. Drift now into the closing breath of the Proterozoic, where life, having learned the language of form, begins to speak in patterns. These are not the rigid designs of bone and joint, not yet, but the flowing symmetries of embryonic intention, repetition, segmentation, rhythm. In these last quiet pages of a billion-year-long story, something stirs inside the softness. Life has begun to draw blueprints, not with ink or instruction, but with genes that know when to whisper and when to wait. The canvas is the cell. The brush is time. And the result is not just shape, but shape that knows how to make more of itself. Across the seabed, organisms no longer grow only outward. They now grow according to rules. One end becomes different from the other. One side mirrors the other. Repeated segments emerge down the length of a body, the result of genetic switches flicking on and off like a lullaby played in Morse code. These are not skeletons. These are the instructions for skeletons, not eyes, but the symmetry that will one day hold them. Not movement, but the foundation for musculature, for structure, for direction. Much of this change happens in the dark, inside eggs and embryos, so tiny they never leave a fossil behind. It happens before anything is born, in layers of cells dividing with exquisite precision. A gene says, here, and a limb will one day sprout. Another says, twice, and segments form. Another says, stop, and a tail ceases to grow. It is orchestration on a molecular level, a silent symphony playing beneath the surface of the sea. This is the beginning of developmental biology, though no one is watching. The oceans are still quiet. There are no eyes to admire the elegance of these patterns. But life does not wait for applause. It builds anyway. It builds because it must. Because evolution rewards order when it brings advantage, and complexity when it brings survival. Slowly, cells specialize with greater refinement. Some move to the outside of an embryo to become skin. Others migrate inward to become gut. Some will form nerves, others muscles. The germ layers are forming: ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm, the foundational triad from which all animal tissues will arise. Now float beside one of these early creatures, drifting gently in the soft current. Its body is simple by modern standards, yet rich with intention. It bears a front and a back, a left and a right. Its cells pulse in harmony, driven by gradients of molecules that tell them where they are. This positional information is not spoken in words, but in the concentration of chemicals, diffusing like perfume through a crowd. Cells read their position by sensing these gradients, like blind architects mapping a building by scent alone. These spatial patterns are guided by homeotic genes, those ancient choreographers that tell a body how to arrange its parts. These genes, conserved through deep time, are present in your body too. They determine the layout of your spine, the order of your ribs, the position of your limbs. They have changed, mutated, adapted, but they began here, in these soft bodied forms suspended in Precambrian seas. Your very shape was first imagined by creatures who had no skeletons, no language, no idea they were building the architecture of the future. And what is most astonishing is how simple the rules are: a few molecular gradients, a few switches. And yet from them arises the endless diversity of animal life to come. All vertebrates share variations on this blueprint. So do insects, mollusks, annelids. The patterns established here echo forward into trilobites, into dinosaurs, into birds and wolves and whales, and into you, your face, your fingers, your spine. They were all once ripples in a sea of signaling molecules, shaped by ancient instructions written in a language older than bone. Even now, when you were an embryo, your body retraced these steps. Layers formed, cells folded, patterns emerged directed by genes that remember. Development recapitulates evolution, not perfectly, but with shadows that reach across time. Inside your growth, you replay the Proterozoic, the softness, the folding, the patterning, before you harden into shape. Outside, the Earth is also changing. Oxygen levels are higher now than at any other time in the eon. The oceans, once thick with iron and shadow, are clearer, more dynamic. Nutrients pulse through currents. The seafloor is textured with life. With increased oxygen, energy flows more efficiently. Muscles, when they arrive, will be stronger. Movement will become quicker. Complexity will have the fuel it needs. The stage is nearly set for the Cambrian, but we are still in the final act of the Proterozoic, where the foundation must be finished before the flourish can begin. As you rest, imagine your dreams forming like these patterns. One image flows into the next, but with symmetry, with repetition. Faces shift, scenes repeat. You are not lost, you are patterned. Sleep itself is a cycle. Your brain waves move through stages like waves through a tide pool, rising and falling with chemical rhythms. Your breath, too, follows this ancient design. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, a bilateral echo in your chest. And just as these early creatures wrote the first drafts of bodies with genes and gradients, your own body now follows those instructions without needing to think. You are not assembling yourself anew, but you are still living by that ancient code. Your cells divide in patterns. Your healing follows pathways. Your memory forms in neural networks shaped by synaptic blueprints laid down in fetal life. So sleep now, not as an accident, but as a continuation. You are not a random thing. You are a patterned being, shaped by forces older than rock, whispered into being by cells that once floated, without bones or teeth or eyes. Let that knowledge comfort you. You are not separate from the Earth's long memory. You are its latest sentence. And tonight, as you sink into your sheets, you are returning to that slow rhythm, to the ancient art of building without haste, to the quiet breath of bodies becoming. Now let your breath slow, as if it were syncing with something vast and old, an inhale that has taken 1,000,000,000 years to rise, an exhale still unfurling in the silence of night. You are no longer just lying in a room or dreaming in a bed. You are nestled inside the lungs of a planet that has only just learned to breathe. The Proterozoic Earth, once shrouded in haze and silence, is now rich with oxygen, not in sudden floods, not in dramatic pulses, but in quiet accumulation, molecule by molecule, shaped by light and time and the slow alchemy of photosynthesis. For so long, oxygen was a byproduct, a waste, an accident of early life. But now, as cyanobacteria continued to flood the seas and atmosphere with it, and as algae and other photosynthetic eukaryotes join the song, that oxygen has become something else entirely. Possibility. Life had always existed, but now it could burn. Not in fire, but in metabolism. Oxygen, more than any other molecule, unlocked the energy needed for true complexity. It offered a pathway to extract far more fuel from the same food. It made size feasible, motion efficient, and thinking eventually possible. Imagine drifting through the shallow coastal waters of a late Proterozoic sea. The sky above is no longer dull and gray, but deep blue, ringed at dusk with crimson and amber. The water is clearer than it has ever been. Light sinks deeper. The organisms here are different now, richer in form, more expressive. They move with purpose, whether by cilia or by muscular contractions. They grow larger, not just in size, but in intricacy. Their tissues specialize, their surfaces ripple with receptors, their interiors teem with organelles. They are not yet animals in the modern sense, but they are near. The leap is close. And all of this, the architecture, the movement, the signaling, the very pace of life, is powered by oxygen. It is not just present, it is integrated. It flows through cell membranes, through mitochondria, into the web of biochemical reactions that animate these beings. With every molecule consumed, ATP is produced, tiny packets of energy that power the beating of flagella, the copying of DNA, the construction of membranes. Before oxygen, life moved slowly. Now it can quicken, stretch outward, try new forms without so quickly exhausting itself. You might think oxygen is simple because it is invisible, because we rarely feel its presence except in its absence. But it is not simple. It is reactive, hungry, prone to sparking chain reactions if left unchecked. The organisms that use it must also defend against it, building antioxidants, crafting molecular shields to keep its power contained. In this way, oxygen is both gift and risk, just like fire, just like thought, just like anything powerful enough to change the world. The Earth, too, has changed in response. Weathering on the continents shifts with the chemistry of the air. Iron rusts on land as it once did in the sea. Sulfur cycles alter. Methane, once dominant, is broken down more easily in an oxygen-rich world, cooling the planet and contributing to the great glaciations of the cryogenian period. Life breathes out. The climate breathes in. The balance is delicate, evolving, but alive. Let your own breathing fall into rhythm with this great planetary exhale. Inhale as if you are pulling ancient air into your lungs, not just the mix of gases that surrounds you now, but the first true oxygen, the kind that allowed life to leap into complexity. Exhale as if releasing the weight of time itself, the soft history of a planet, learning to inhale more deeply, to offer more space for the wildness of living. And it is wild, this moment in time. Oxygen levels fluctuate. At times they spike, supporting bursts of evolutionary experimentation. At others, they fall, retreating like a tide and pressing life back into the shadows. But each swing is higher than the last, each return richer than before. By the late Proterozoic, Oxygen may have reached nearly modern levels. The stage is set for explosion, for eyes and shells, and predators and prey. But here now, just before the burst, there's a stillness, a held breath. It is the pause before the curtain rises. We stand, or rather we float at the boundary of two eras. Behind us lies the Proterozoic, with its rusted oceans and its microbial carpets, its long, patient gestation of complexity. Ahead lies the Phanerozoic, the era of visible life, of biodiversity writ large, of coral reefs and dragonflies and dinosaurs and humans. But this edge, this transition, is not abrupt. It is a liminal space, a twilight that holds both silence and the suggestion of music. You are sleeping now in that twilight, held between the deep past and the impending future. You are floating in an atmosphere that is ready to carry voices, ready to fill lungs, ready to feed brains. The air around you, though quiet, is charged with anticipation, and inside your own body, the mitochondria still hum, each one a descendant of a free-living bacterium, each one managing oxygen with care and turning it into energy with extraordinary grace. You do not command them. They serve you without question, and in serving, they remind you, you are not separate from this great breath. You are a chamber within it. You are a cathedral of inherited breath, built from symbiosis and shaped by molecules older than stars. So sleep now, breathing not just for yourself, but as part of this greater rhythm. Let that exhale of the earth carry you deeper into rest. Let the silent song of oxygen, born in ancient seas and stoked by cyanobacteria under early suns, wash through your blood. Let your dreams drift through the clear waters of a world newly awakened to fireless flame. The earth has learned to breathe, and so have you. Let yourself move now with the slow, fluid rhythm of something that has no beginning and no end, only cycles. You are no longer only breathing with the earth, you are dancing with it, caught in the ancient, spiraling waltz of carbon. This element, so simple in form, so quiet in presence, binds all life together. Carbon is not just in your body, it is your body. It is the skeleton of molecules, the spine of sugars, the architecture of proteins and DNA. It is the ink in which life writes its story, and it has been flowing, exchanging, transforming, long before cells learned to divide, or the sky remembered how to be blue. In the Proterozoic world, carbon drifted between earth, ocean, and sky like a forgotten melody, sometimes held in stone, sometimes freed by breath, sometimes buried in silence. It was the mediator between the living and the not living, the bridge between biology and geology. And at this stage in Earth's deep time, it began to move differently. The carbon cycle, once a simple loop between ocean and atmosphere, now grew more layered, more complex, more intimately tied to life itself. Volcanoes still exhaled carbon dioxide into the air, a breath from deep within the earth. Rain, falling through this enriched atmosphere, became slightly acidic, dissolving minerals from rock. Rivers carried this carbon-laden water to the seas, where it combined with calcium to form carbonates, solid structures that sank to the ocean floor, sequestering carbon for millennia. These deposits would later rise in mountains, only to be weathered again, returning carbon to the sky. A loop, a breath, a long conversation between continents, clouds, and the quiet ocean bed. But now, with photosynthetic life flourishing, the dance of carbon took on a new rhythm. Plants and algae, and before them, their ancestral cyanobacteria, drew carbon from the air, folding it into sugar with sunlight's help, that sugar fed cells, powered metabolisms, built structures, and when those organisms died, some of that carbon was buried. If enough of it escaped decomposition, if it sank beneath layers of sediment, it could be stored, locked away in shale and limestone and future coal seams. And when carbon is buried, oxygen remains. The atmosphere grows richer. The air grows clearer. The world tilts closer to complexity. The burial of organic carbon is not just a chemical trick. It is the hinge upon which the entire biosphere turns. Because without it, oxygen would not build. For every molecule of carbon buried, a molecule of O2 is left behind. And so the very breath you take tonight is in some way made possible by the silence of things long dead, organisms that once grew, then sank, and were never heard from again. Their absence is your presence. Their burial is your breath. Let that drift through your mind now as you settle deeper into rest. You are not merely lying still. You are part of a flow that never stops. The carbon in your body is ancient. Some of it once floated in the Proterozoic air. Some of it lived in an algal bloom 500 million years ago. Some of it crystallized in limestone, only to be released again when that stone was weathered and broken down. You are not separate from the Earth's story. You are a temporary shape that carbon has taken, passing through one form to another. One phase as in an endless waltz. And with this cycling came climate. The Proterozoic Earth was governed not by caprice, but by feedback, slow, deep mechanisms that kept its temperature within a narrow, livable range, despite a faint young sun. When carbon dioxide rose, warming followed. When life or rock drew it down, the planet cooled. These loops of cause and effect helped balance the world, but they were not always stable. At times, the system overshot. Glaciations came, oceans froze, carbon accumulated in the atmosphere again, and thaw returned, the balance reset. Not perfect, but persistent. A breathing planet, a self-regulating Earth. In you, too, balance is delicate. The carbon you eat, the carbon you exhale, the way your cells manage their energy, all of it that mirrors this ancient system. Your own metabolic pathways are echoes of the carbon cycle, compressed into the space of your body. Glycolysis, the Krebs cycle. These are not just biochemical trivia. They are inherited rituals. The same atoms, the same energy flows, passed down from cells that lived in Proterozoic waters, building sugars from light and releasing carbon with each death. Their rhythm is yours. And so the Earth turned slowly, with its carbon dancing between spheres. With every burial of organic matter, the future became a little more possible. Oxygen rose. The atmosphere lightened. The climate found moments of warmth, of opportunity. Life responded, not with sudden change, but with slow elaboration. More form, more size, more risk, and eventually, though not yet, more movement. Carbon made it all possible, not loudly, not proudly, but faithfully. As you sleep now, you are held by this faithfulness. Your body gently exhales CO2 with every breath, in sending it back into the air, back into the world. You are not a closed system. You are a participant in a story that stretches from the cores of ancient volcanoes to the soft fall of a leaf. And while you rest, the carbon within you continues its journey, unaware of its own path, yet guided by laws older than light. There is beauty in this quiet continuity. Not all change is visible. Not all revolutions are loud. Sometimes, the most profound transformations happen through steady motion, through cycles that repeat and evolve, through molecules that carry memory even though they cannot think. Carbon does not choose, but it remembers in its own way every life it has touched, and tonight it touches you. The water is clearer now than it has ever been. Light no longer fades into haze just beneath the surface, but sinks down in shafts of gold, stroking the seabed, illuminating the soft outlines of bodies that never knew what it meant to see. For so long, life has lived in touch, in taste, in chemical gradients that whisper rather than show. But something is changing in the Proterozoic world, not in a sudden burst of vision, but in the quiet awakening of light sensitivity. Somewhere, in a drifting colony of cells, a pigment changes when light touches it. Somewhere else, a patch of tissue begins to differentiate, to curve, to focus. The earth is opening its eyes, not fully, not sharply, but enough to know that light is more than energy. It is information, and once known, it cannot be forgotten. Imagine now, drifting in the shallows of a warm Proterozoic sea, your body no more than a soft column of cells, but one of them, or a cluster, responds to light. Not with image, not with color, but with direction. Perhaps you swim toward it, sensing that energy comes with brightness. Or perhaps you flee it, retreating to the safety of shadow. There is no thought in this movement, no choice as we understand it. But there is behavior. There is a first question, where is the light? And with it, the beginnings of a world no longer felt only by touch, but glimpsed. These primitive eye spots, clusters of photoreceptive molecules embedded in membranes, mark the earliest attempts at vision. They are not eyes, not yet, but they are light sensors, tuning organisms to the rhythm of day and night, helping align movement with the sun's arc. The genes that produce these light-sensitive proteins, opsins, are ancient. They still live in your own body, in your retinas, in the cells that tell you whether the room has dimmed or brightened. They were present before lenses, before pupils, before brains. And when they first emerged, they may have been used for nothing more than circadian timing. But that was enough to begin. To see light is to make sense of time, to know whether it is day or night, whether the surface is near, whether food lies in one direction or danger in another. With light comes orientation. With orientation comes coordination. With coordination comes complexity. The simple ability to detect brightness begins to shape behavior, and with it, evolution. Organisms that can sense light can also avoid harm. They can time their feeding. They can move with intention. And so, slowly, the arms race begins. But in the Proterozoic, there is no violence yet. The eyes that are beginning to form are not for hunting, not yet. They are for alignment, for sensing warmth, or for feeling the world open in more than one dimension. There is no seeing in the modern sense, no shape, no edge, no depth, and just a flicker of contrast, a brightness, a shadow, and in that flicker, a world of possibility begins to open. Think of your own development. When you were forming in the darkness of the womb, your eyes appeared long before you opened them. Before you could see, light shaped your circadian rhythms, your brain's wiring, your hormonal flow. The body prepares for sight before sight exists. Just as the Proterozoic Earth was prepared for vision before vision took hold. The genes were in place, the pigments ready, the ocean clear enough to make light meaningful. The eye was not invented in a moment. It was composed across ages, and it would not be just one eye. Vision would emerge independently in multiple lineages, Convergent evolution tracing the same path through different bodies. Mollusks, arthropods, vertebrates, all would find their own ways to shape light into meaning. But before all of them, in this stillness before the Cambrian dawn, came the suggestion of vision. The prelude, the draft, the flicker behind closed lids. Even now, there are creatures who live only by the light they do not see. Algae with photosensitive patches, worms with eye spots, single-celled eukaryotes with organelles that respond to brightness. And in you, in the deep recesses of your brain, there is a nucleus that responds to light even when your eyes are closed. It regulates your sleep, your alertness, your hormonal tides. You are not just a being who sees. You are a being who is shaped by seeing, whether you notice it or not. Let your dreams begin to open like those ancient eyes, not all at once, not clearly. Let them flicker in and out of brightness. Let them recognize shadow and warmth and motion. You are floating in a world just beginning to register contrast, a world where light is beginning to inform shape, where organisms drift and roll toward brightness because something inside them whispers that this is the way forward. And what does it mean to begin to see when no one yet sees you? The Proterozoic ocean is still mostly unaware. There is no gaze to return, no predator to hide from, no mutet to impress, just organisms sensing, reacting, tuning their internal rhythms to the arc of the sun. But that is enough. Awareness does not require an object. It begins with sensitivity, with the ability to change because of what is perceived. The earth itself has changed under this new light. The cycles of carbon and oxygen have stabilized enough to support more rapid evolutionary change. The atmosphere is clear enough to offer regular rhythms of brightness and darkness. The crust moves continents into shallower seas where light penetrates. The sea, once a smothering green, is now a luminous blue-green, laced with algae, filled with drifting, blinking cells. And in these waters, the beginnings of eyes are not just a feature, they are a promise. The future they unlock includes not only navigation, but wonder. With vision will come shape. With shape, interaction. With interaction, relationship. And with relationship, all of the drama and beauty that life will one day carry. But here, in this soft hour of deep time, it is still gentle, still without teeth, still without cries, just flickers, just direction, just the idea that light can be noticed. So sleep now, beneath your own closed lids, with your body remembering what it is to feel light through skin. Let your dreams be simple, brightness, movement, contrast, calm. Let the first eyes that ever lived flicker inside you, not as vision, but as invitation. Not to look, but to notice, not to analyze, but to drift with awareness. For the first time, the earth is being seen, however faintly, and perhaps the first eyes did not only sense light, they sensed the world seeing itself. Now we stand at the edge of something vast, not a cliff, not a gate, but a widening. The long sleep of the Proterozoic is nearly over. For billions of years, the earth has whispered its changes slowly, folding time into sediment, teaching cells how to breathe, how to bond, how to move. And now, as the eon draws to its quiet close, all those lessons gather into tension. Not panic, not noise, but anticipation. A pause before the breath becomes a song. The world is not yet bursting, but it is leaning forward. Every grain of sand, every ripple of water, every flicker of pigment in a drifting cell feels the pressure of what is coming. It is a strange stillness, not quiet from lack, but quiet from readiness. This is the threshold before the Cambrian, the final soft step in the Proterozoic journey. The sky has cleared, the oceans are rich, oxygen is abundant enough to sustain energy-hungry bodies. Genes have refined themselves into libraries of complexity, toolkits waiting to be used, and vision, in its earliest forms, has begun to guide movement, to suggest purpose. All the elements for an explosion are present, but not yet assembled, not quite. As you drift here, half asleep and gently aware, you are floating in a moment of Earth's history when everything is aligned but nothing has yet begun. The final days of the Proterozoic do not blaze, they shimmer. In the shallows of the oceans, soft-bodied organisms continue to lie across the seabed like pressed flowers. They pulse, they feed, they do not hunt, but they respond. Their tissues carry the memory of earlier ages, of slime, of symbiosis, of light just beginning to matter, and within their quiet forms, a shift begins, not on the outside, but within. Development is changing. Embryos that once grew in simple circular forms now begin to show more variation. New genes appear that alter timing, that tweak structure, that allow for more experimentation. The Hox genes, those master architects of body layout, have expanded. They no longer just say head or tail. They begin to say segment, appendage, eye. The vocabulary of biology grows richer, not because the old words are forgotten, but because they are recombined into more intricate sentences. Life is ready to try poetry, but it is still quiet. The seafloor does not yet bear tracks or burrows. The water is not yet stirred by fast fins or the snap of jaws. The arms race of evolution has not begun, and yet the arms are being built. Tentative limbs, undifferentiated flaps, rows of repeated structures that do not yet know what they are for. There is a feeling, even in this deep time, of suspense. The world is holding its breath. The darkness before dawn is not absence. It is potential. Even the geology responds. Sediments begin to change as organisms begin to press more deeply into the mud. Bioturbation, life disturbing the substrate, will soon begin. But for now, the sediments still lie smooth, a quiet canvas for the fossils of soft things. And in those fossils, we see not innovation, but suggestion, the hint of symmetry, the echo of segmentation, the early stages of complexity that will soon bloom into trilobites and anemones and creatures whose forms will seem almost sudden. But they are not sudden. They are built here patiently over hundreds of millions of years. The Cambrian explosion is not a spark. It is a slow ignition. Let your breath settle now, low and even, as if you are lying just below the surface of the water, watching light ripple across the floor. You are suspended in time, not in the rush of what comes next, but in the grace of what has been built. There is comfort in this pause. All the rushing will come. But tonight you are still in the stillness, in the long preparation that made the future possible. In the shallows, algae drift like green lace. Some organisms cling to them, not yet feeding, but forming associations that will one day become ecosystems. Small plankton float in delicate chains. Their glassy walls catch sunlight and shimmer, living briefly and dying gently, their remains settling into the seafloor to become the chalk and limestone of distant mountains. Even death is part of the building now. Nothing is wasted, some and far below, in the deeper waters, other cells stir. Some may begin to sense pressure to respond to vibration. Others may fold their bodies in new ways, coiling or flexing, forming inner cavities. The experimentation is endless. Most of it will lead nowhere. Most forms will disappear, unrecorded, unnamed. But some will last. And from them, the Cambrian world will emerge, fully clothed in complexity. But we are not there yet. You are still floating in the gentle arms of the Proterozoic, the eon that gave the earth its breath, its blue sky, its first attempt at vision, its slow crawl toward organization. It was never meant to dazzle, it was meant to prepare. And in that preparation, there is a kind of beauty that the later eons will never quite replicate. The beauty of potential unspent. The beauty of silence that hums with what could be. Let that silence hold you now. Oh, you are part of it. Your cells, your oxygen, your ability to sleep and dream and wake again, all are gifts of this long age. You do not need drama to feel wonder. You do not need movement to be moved. The earth's deepest changes happened without sound, without spectacle, just light meeting water, just cells agreeing to live together, just atoms of carbon turning to sugars, to structures, to thoughts. So rest here at the threshold. Let the Cambrian wait. It is almost time to awaken, but not yet. Now drift into the last fold of this long eon, this slow breath of becoming. You are not stepping into an ending, but into the soft, trailing edge of a beginning that never rushed. The Proterozoic does not end with a bang or a roar. It fades, like a dream that was never loud to begin with. It leaves behind no monument, only continuity. A record not of events, but of conditions. It is an eon that shaped the future by building the stage, laying the foundation, drawing the first deep lines across the canvas of life. And now it lies beneath you, layers of ancient rock, memories in iron and shale, and quiet fossils pressed into mud. You are sleeping in its echo. You are sleeping in ancient light, because that light, though born of stars and filtered through sky, is no longer just physics. It has passed through chloroplasts and shaped the pulse of cells. It has danced across algae and passed into sugars and breath. It has bounced from pigment to pigment inside early eyes, triggering responses that were not yet sight but were something close. And now, that same light, filtered by the thin skin of the atmosphere, still touches your face in the morning and tells your body when to wake. You are regulated by rhythms that began in shallow seas. You sleep not just by exhaustion, but by design, by the design of light. Outside your window, the stars hang overhead in silence, as they have since before the earth cooled, before the continents formed. But you are not beneath a cold sky anymore. You are inside a world that has changed its very chemistry to support you. The air around you is filled with oxygen, molecules crafted over millennia by organisms you'll never meet. That air supports forests, feeds fires, and slips effortlessly into your lungs. You do not need to ask it to be there. It simply is. A gift passed down from the Proterozoic to now. The organisms of that age, long gone and mostly forgotten, did not roar or bloom. They spread slowly in films and mats, in drifting colonies and quiet shells. They laid down the iron in your blood, the carbon in your bones, the calcium in your teeth. They breathed out the atmosphere, and in doing so, breathed you into possibility. They gave you mitochondria, chloroplasts, the language of genes. They died quietly in oceans that no longer exist, and were buried in layers that now rise as cliffs or crumble as dust. But they are not lost. They are you. Every night when you sleep, your body returns to rhythms that echo the Earth's. Temperature drops, activity slows, cells repair. Memory rewrites itself in long chemical phrases. You descend through stages of awareness, like a diver passing through layers of water, from bright thoughts into deeper currents of sensation, then into the weightless stillness of dream. That rhythm, that descent, feels natural because it is ancient. It was shaped when the first cells learned to follow light and dark, to align their chemistry with the rotation of the earth. And in your dreams, whether you know it or not, there is space for these stories. Stories with no characters and no dialogue. Stories told in shifting patterns and pulses, in molecular rhythms and geological swells. The earth remembers itself inside you. You are not just dreaming on this planet, you are dreaming with it. Now, the Cambrian waits beyond the horizon, just over the curve of time, where shells will form and limbs will crawl, and the first predator will blink open an eye that sees not only light, but prey. But this is not yet that world. This is still the moment before the bloom, the deep breath before the leap, the final silent stanza in the poem of preparation. There is no need to rush toward the next verse. Let it come on its own. As you lie still, feel the weight of time beneath you, not as burden, but as cradle. You are not suspended in air, but resting on stone that once was sea floor, once was magma, once was the bed for 1 billion lives. The planet holds you, not metaphorically, but physically. The calcium in your bones was once dissolved in an ocean. The phosphorus in your DNA was once part of ancient sediment. You are made of places you have never seen, and above you, the sky remains the sky, but it too has changed. What was once a haze of methane and cloud is now a clear dome that shelters sound, that filters sunlight, that holds warmth like breath in cupped hands. It is blue, yes, but it is not simply blue. It is the sum of interactions, the product of photosynthesis, the consequence of exhalations from lives long gone. You are not just under this sky, you are part of its story. So let sleep carry you now, softly, steadily, not as escape, but as return. You are returning to the quiet cycles that made you possible, returning to the breath of ancient algae, returning to the patience of sediment, returning to the silence of a time that built everything you take for granted. The Proterozoic is not past. It is within. It is the deep memory of the earth, the part that still whispers beneath all the noise, beneath the hum of machines and the spin of satellites. It is the long exhale in which life grew its spine, its symmetry, its first but fragile sense of light. And though we have left it behind in time, we carry it forward in every breath, every thought, every cell. Sleep now. You are not drifting away. You are drifting deeper.